Hey, what is going on guys? Danny here, hope you've all been doing well. In this video, we'll be talking about the upcoming X570 motherboards that will be launching alongside AMD's Ryzen 3000 processors for the desktop. These new processors look absolutely fantastic, from the Ryzen 5 3600 all the way to the top dog, the 16-core Ryzen 9 3950X. The whole stack has almost everyone impressed and very hyped for the release. The new CPUs from a pricing, performance, value, and technology standpoint are very attractive as they are seriously giving Intel a run for their money. I mentioned value and pricing because AMD's CPUs compared to their competitor have generally always been looked at as the better buy in this regard. With their new third generation processors, I'd say they have delivered again in various ways, continuing that trend of taking the market by storm when it comes to offering impeccable performance at lower price points. With that said though, there's been a lot of talk surrounding the new X570 motherboards within the PC hardware community. This new generation of motherboards from partners such as Asus, Gigabyte, MSI, and ASRock all look quite impressive. This type of attention to detail that motherboard manufacturers have given to AMD for this generation, some would say has never been seen before. The boards are truly quite the step up when compared to the previous generation in terms of build quality and feature set. When manufacturers like Gigabyte, for example, are using super solid VRM configurations for their top-end boards, ASRock announcing a board that has total integration for a custom water loop, all of these manufacturers have put in a lot of thought towards AMD this generation, and rightfully so, as Zen 2 basically propels AMD forward to becoming the market leader, in the DIY space at least. So naturally, you're going to be seeing a lot of premium quality motherboards coming to the market supporting this platform. With the X570 chipset, this will be the first time we will be able to take advantage of PCI Express 4.0. For expansion devices that will need the extra bandwidth, such as the new generation of Nvme drives boasting speeds of up to 5 GB per second, they will be able to take advantage of that. Along with that, many other features like Wi-Fi AX or Wi-Fi 6 support, much better memory support, and higher overclocking potential are some of the other things that you can expect. The updated chipset also brings more to the table in terms of I/O, like native USB 3.2 Gen 2 compatibility. Now, the only caveat to the new chipset is that under operation, it does use about 11 watts of power when compared to the older X470 and X370 chipsets, which were around 5 watts. Therefore, you'll be seeing a lot of motherboards with active cooling solutions on them, like a small fan, and some of the higher end motherboards will have large heat sinks to accommodate, like the X570 Aorus Extreme. Now, before you all start to get too excited, the other thing I wanted to talk about was the cost of these motherboards, and this is something that stirred up a lot of buzz within the community. The X570 motherboards will be bringing all these great upgrades over the previous gen, but that's not going to come without a price increase. The X570 motherboards will be significantly more expensive when compared to the previous generation. Even the lower tier X570 motherboards that don't have beefy VRMs on them or a plethora of I/O, missing Wi-Fi, even those boards you can expect them to be upwards of $200. MSI CEO Charles Chang was interviewed by Tom's Hardware, and even he had confirmed that the new platform will come with higher pricing, and he said that you can expect there to be a gap between the X470 and X570 motherboards. So, some people were looking at this negatively, thinking that this will really ruin AMD's value proposition for the new 3rd generation Ryzen processors. If you looked at the whole stack, the chips that they're offering in regards to performance, core, and thread count really put Intel to shame. I mean, $499, you're getting a 12-core, 24-thread CPU that not only gives you performance that the 9920X offers, but also beats it. The 3600X could also be looked at as a much cheaper 8700K. But when you factor in the cost of an X570 motherboard, the savings diminished. It's actually kind of funny because last year with the mining boom, you had GPUs skyrocket in price, RAM, SSDs, and flash memory in general was also expensive due to quote-unquote there being a shortage. But now that the GPU prices have normalized to MSRP levels at least, and flash memory has come down so dramatically in price, now the cost of motherboards for the new platform went up, I guess you can't really win them all, can you? So I actually also have some motherboard pricing information I wanted to share with you guys for some of the new X570 motherboards. Most of the boards are from Gigabyte, but there was also one Asus board in the list as well. This pricing information comes from a distributor here in Canada that deals with all the major retailers, so known stores like Memory Express or Canada Computers, for example. Starting from the top of the list, we have Gigabyte's Aorus X570 Master motherboard, which has an associated price tag of $490. The Aorus X570 Ultra will be $410, the Pro Wi-Fi will be $370, the X570i Aorus Pro Wi-Fi, the ITX board that Gigabyte will be releasing is $300, followed by the Aorus Elite at $270, and the Gaming X, the lowest end X570 board from Gigabyte, which will be $230. The Asus board that was also included in the list was the Tough Gaming X570 Plus board, which will be $240. So if you take a look at this list and compare it to the models from the previous generation, then you will notice that there is a substantial increase in the price. Like the Gaming 7 Wi-Fi, which was the flagship board for the X470 series, that board retailed for around $300 Canadian dollars. So we're looking at almost a $200 jump between that board and the X570 Aorus Master. And what's funny is that the X570 Aorus Master isn't even the top-end board for the 500 series. That would be the Aorus Extreme, which wasn't even included in the list, but I'll expect that board to be around $650 to $700. The Asus TUF X570 is about $60 more expensive than the X470 TUF, which retails for around $180. So across the board, we're seeing increases. I've seen some statements made by people that these price increases are deal breakers for the Ryzen 3000 processors, but I disagree. You see, even though the release of the X570 boards with all the great new features alongside the new chips is quite complimentary, it's not a necessity. This has always been one of the major selling points for AMD's AM4 platform: longevity, where someone who already owns a Ryzen processor with an X470, X370, or B450 motherboard can simply drop in one of the new CPUs and call it a day. And even if you don't own an older AM4 motherboard or never had a Ryzen CPU but wanted the new chip, there's nothing stopping you from using a B450 or X470 board with it. AMD assured everyone that they were committed to maintaining backwards compatibility. All you need to do is flash the BIOS of the board and you're good to go. In fact, a lot of motherboard manufacturers are pushing out BIOS updates for the older chipset boards to enable compatibility with the newer generation chips. Even my Gigabyte AX370 Gaming 5 got the update. So if I wanted, all I need is the new chips, and that's it. The thing is, you don't need to buy an X570 motherboard if you don't need it. You have to ask yourself, do you need PCI Express 4.0? Will you be taking advantage of it? Do you need a motherboard with overkill VRMs because you want to push a 16-core chip to the limit? Then yes, I can see those being viable reasons for the need of an X570 motherboard. But if you don't need all that and you're just planning on getting a 3600 or 3700X and leaving it at its stock configuration, then you'll be just fine with an older chipset motherboard. Nobody's forcing you to get an X570 motherboard. AMD themselves came out and made this statement that don't look at X570 as a replacement for X470 motherboards, but rather look at it as the next tier for people who want to use Gen 4 NVMEs and take advantage of the other new chipset features. AMD also said that you can expect the same performance out of these chips regardless of whether or not you use a higher end X570 board or a B450 board. Granted, they're probably talking about stock configuration and not overclocking, since that's technically going out of manufacturer spec. And obviously nobody should be pairing a 16-core CPU with some cheap A320 motherboard they got for like $50. That would just be silly. One of the noteworthy things that MSI's CEO said, which has me intrigued, was that he mentions AMD is changing its marketing strategy to focus on being a premium brand, as opposed to being the value alternative. The quote from the Tom's Hardware interview where he mentions, "Lots of people ask me, what do you think about today's AMD? I say today's AMD is a completely different company compared to 2, 3, 5 years ago," Chang said. They have nice technology and they are there to put the higher spec with reasonable pricing, but right now they say, "Hey Charles, let's push the marketing to the higher end. So let's sell higher pricing motherboards, higher spec motherboards, and let's see what will happen in the market." So I don't think that AMD is the company that wants to sell low cost here. AMD has always been looked at as the cheaper brand alternative in both the CPU market and GPU market. I think this is something that we can all agree on. People would expect AMD to make substantial moves within those segments, only to come at lower price points when compared to Intel and Nvidia. This is something that they actually want to change. They don't want to be looked at as the second fiddle anymore. This is evident obviously with the new expensive motherboards, like for example, ASRock is releasing the Aqua motherboard that has integrated water cooling for $1,000, which is absolutely crazy for a mainstream platform, but AMD's upcoming RX 5700 series cards have made this statement as well. A lot of people were expecting them to significantly undercut Nvidia, but instead those cards were announced with MSRPs closer to their Nvidia counterparts. If you look at this from a business standpoint, it makes sense. Why would you want to be praised as that budget brand? No company ever wants that. I know all of us in the tech community love to praise AMD for cheaper parts and whatnot, but they want themselves to be associated with being the market leader now. I don't know how all of this will play out in the future. What I'll say is that AMD should obviously do what's best for themselves, whatever makes them the most money. If they want to be eventually looked at as that premium brand as well, then all the more power to them. However, they aren't nearly as big as Intel or Nvidia, and this could be some dangerous water they're treading. But that's all I wanted to talk about in this video. A lot of interesting stuff going on as we're getting closer to the Ryzen 3rd Gen release. I want to hear from you guys though. Will you guys be getting an X570 motherboard, or will you be buying a previous gen motherboard, or continue to use the existing Ryzen board you have? If you liked the video, then leave a like. Check out the video description for my other videos and ways to support the channel. Thanks for watching guys, take care, and I'll see you in the next one.